representative into the US State Department. The US investigation, frankly, is being used as a legal pretext for broad tariffs on 60 or so countries rather than effectively combating forced labour. The decision to increase tariffs on New Zealand is disappointing, though not unexpected. Tariffs have become a significant part of the Trump administration's playbook, but New Zealand strongly opposes them because, as we've said from the beginning, they raise costs, disrupt supply chains, and ultimately make the global economy worse off. These actions create more uncertainty at a time when the world trading system is under real pressure, and it is more important than ever that like-minded countries work together to keep trade moving, reduce barriers, and make it easier for our businesses to sell what they produce. But it does underscore, yet again, why our government has made it a priority to diversify, to strengthen and to broaden our existing trade agreements and to pursue new trade deals. The most significant of these, as we've talked about before, is the Indian FTA, and it's already delivering major gains for New Zealand before it's even come into force. Total exports to India are up 71% since we came to government, and they're up over 22% in the last year alone. It's also why National will campaign on pursuing a further 7 new markets in our next term of government. Trade isn't about what leaves our port, it's about what actually comes back into our communities. A truck driver getting more work, a pack house taking on extra shifts, a small engineering firm supplying equipment, or a local cafe serving the people who keep these businesses running. The good news is that despite the Trump tariffs and the global fuel crisis driven by the Middle East conflict, our exporters are showing just how brilliant and agile they are. Stats NZ's latest figures show our goods exports reached $8.1 billion in June 26, up 25% on June last year. And of course, that followed a very strong May when exports reached $8.7 billion, up $1.1 billion or 15% on May 2025. But most New Zealanders don't wake up thinking about export numbers. They wake up thinking about the day ahead, getting to work, paying the mortgage or rent, and if you're a parent, making your kids lunch and getting them to school or to ECE. And that's why a growing economy really matters, and trade is obviously an important part of that. A stronger economy means more jobs and opportunities and more room for the government to invest in the things that people care about. And that includes supporting families with the vital work of raising kids. We know that the cost of early childhood education can put a real strain on household budgets. And that's why National introduced Family Boost to put money back into the pockets of eligible families and make childcare a little bit more affordable. We expanded the scheme 12 months ago from a 25% refund to 40%, and we increased the maximum payment from $75 to $120 per week and lifted the eligibility so that more families could claim it. Shortly, I'll pass to Nicola to talk about the latest figures and the update since the expansion of Family Boost. This policy was a priority for National in the first term of government, and yesterday we also announced that we'll build on this with our policy to extend and modernise paid parental leave. If re-elected, National will extend paid parental leave from 26 out to 30 weeks in our second term. Extending paid parental leave and giving parents more flexibility gives them a lot more choice about spending more time at home with their baby. Together with the income tax relief and Family Boost and our changes to paid parental leave, it's all part of National's plan to support mums and dads as they balance both work and family responsibilities. I'll now pass to Nicola to talk a little bit more about Family Boost.
Thank you, Prime Minister. As the Prime Minister said, from 1 July last year, the government expanded the eligibility criteria for the Family Boost payment to support parents with early childhood education costs. The legislation delivering that change was supported across the House, and I want to acknowledge Labor's support for it. Those changes are working. 1 year on, we can see that more families are now able to receive Family Boost. In the initial version of the scheme, 54,494 families had received a payment. That was for the March 2025 quarter. By comparison, for the March 2026 quarter, 62,830 families had received a payment under the scheme. So that's an increase of 8,336 families, or around a 15% increase in families benefiting from the Family Boost scheme. We've also seen that the average value of payments made under the scheme has increased substantially. The average claim has increased 70%, up from the approximately $353 per family in the March 2025 quarter to approximately $599 per family in the March 2026 quarter, showing that on average families who are getting support through Family Boost are getting a lot more funding from the scheme. Finally, what we've also seen is that there are more families receiving more than $75 each week from the scheme, with an average of 12,331 families per quarter having received $75 or more each week. So what this data demonstrates is that our moves to expand eligibility for Family Boost have been successful, and I'm pleased that more families are benefiting from the scheme. I also just want to make a note on fuel prices and the temporary targeted supports that the government introduced in relation to high fuel prices in the New Zealand economy. You will recall that when we introduced a boost to the in-work tax credit, along with changes in payments for healthcare workers and another range of supports, we put a trigger in place. That was intended to ensure that those boosts to support lasted either 12 months or for a more limited period if we saw fuel prices being sustained at lower levels. The trigger for Cabinet considering those supports was for the average national fuel price to be below $3 for 4 weeks in a row. MB has been monitoring that carefully. We've had 3 weeks of official data reported with the fuel price below $3, only just, but below $3, and we will get a 4th week's official data this week on Wednesday. We anticipate that that will show fuel prices below $3 for the week previous, however, which will trigger me to take advice to Cabinet on what we do with the scheme going forward. However, officials have advised me that given the significant increase in international fuel prices in the past few weeks, they are anticipating that the fuel price in future weeks will have spiked up above $3 again. You can see that with the gas spy data, which is currently showing prices just up above $3. So therefore, when I take advice to Cabinet next week on the temporary supports, we will consider whether it is appropriate to remove them, given it may be that we are not in a situation where lower prices are being sustained, but rather we had a welcome blip, but it may not be continued. So with that, happy to take your questions.
Absolutely.
It's unlikely. Can we read into that it's unlikely you'll be lifting that support?
Well, look, when we introduced those triggers, they were there for a very important reason, which is that we didn't want to have a blanket, untargeted increase in support. We wanted that tied to high fuel prices. And so what we said was we will fully budget for 12 months worth of extra support, but if we see fuel prices coming down to much lower prices, we should be prepared to take those supports off. I think when we made that trigger, what we were anticipating is if you saw the price fall below $3 for 4 weeks in a row, that would mean you were out of the woods and things were better and you were back into the normal world. We hadn't anticipated that S shape in which prices have gone up and down considerably. So that is new information for Cabinet to consider. And if prices are above $3, that indicates that there will continue to be pressure on the families who we've sought to give extra support, and Cabinet will want to take that into consideration.
How many families are getting the maximum payment from Family Boost?
So the maximum payment for Family Boost is now $120 per week. And while you ask the Prime Minister additional questions, I'm going to get you the exact piece of data in answer to your question, which will be in my table.
I'll take one for Prime Minister if that's
Thomas,
all right.
thank you. That's very kind of you. Are you convinced that you will have Cabinet support from the other coalition partners should you decide to continue with the cost of living relief when you take that paper next? Yes, we'll be doing it as a Cabinet decision. As Nicola said, we got the trigger of 4 weeks under $3. That triggers advice. That then decision ultimately comes through to Cabinet, and we'll make that as a team.
So, are you concerned that David Seymour's been quite vocal about wanting, the support to be targeted and temporary as well? Are you convinced that he will support a measure to extend it if you decide to extend it?
Well, I think we'll take that decision as a Cabinet, but I think all the Cabinet members, irrespective of their party, are very well aware of the potential yo-yo effect of what's happening with the conflict at the moment. I mean, since last week, we've seen the price of oil go up another $20. So, I think we're all going to be quite pragmatic about what the advice says, and we'll have that discussion in Cabinet.
Prime Minister, also on fuel,
yes.
There's a 12 cent per litre increase pegged for January next year. the government has been considering pausing that. Are there any decisions that have been made on that yet?
Not at this stage. As we've said before, we think it's unlikely, highly unlikely, but we'll yet to have a formal conversation about that, and we'll have that in due course. Just about when we do that conversation, obviously, it takes effect 1st of January. We've got some time, and we'll do that conversation, when we need to.
Prime Minister, do you think it's appropriate for one of your ministers, when asked questions by a journalist about their statutory functions, to then pass on those questions to a third party in order for that third party to criticise the journalist?
Well, I'm just not aware of the facts of what you're referencing.
Do you think in general that would be okay as a hypothetical?
It's quite a broad hypothetical.
Yes. I mean, it is a hypothetical. But what is the context, or is there anything you want me to?
The union to put out a press statement about questions said to a minister of yours. The question's not been put publicly anywhere else. Is that appropriate?
Oh, look, I don't have a view on it. I'll have to know more about what the context is. Okay.
This morning you were asked on Radio New Zealand about National having opposed extending paid parental leave in the past.
Yeah.
And you said that you weren't aware of that. Is that feasible?
Well, what I meant is it's 10 years ago in 2016. I've come to Parliament, as you know, 5 or 6 years ago. I'm very much focused on what the right policy is going forward. It may be interesting to you to think about some decision made 10 years ago. I think it was opposing 18 to 26 from memory. But it's just for me, it's a process story, right? And I'm not that interested in that. I'm interested in getting things done, and I'm much more interested and focused on what we're going to do going forward. So I appreciate it may be of interest to you, but frankly, it's not to me.
I mean, Labor is saying, right, they're saying, hey, you shouldn't trust National Party when they make announcements like this, given your track record, right?
Well, I'll just say, look, I think Chris Hipkins has got a bit of pent-up sort of anger and bitterness, because he needs to announce some of his own policies, don't you think? And I don't think that would be quite a good question for you to ask him as to, Sunshine, when are we seeing your policies? So I get Lee likes to chip away and he likes to critique it and all that sort of stuff. But, frankly, living in a world 10 years ago, I'm trying to live in a world 10 years from now and how we set this country up for great success.
Can I just observe that holding the current Prime Minister accountable for the decisions of the Prime Minister a decade ago isn't relevant to what New Zealanders need for their future.
It's fascinating to Benedict.
Chris Luxon is a new leader of the
Nicola,
National Party with a refreshed caucus who are addressing the issues of tomorrow, not the issues of yesterday.
Hold you accountable to your promises that you made at the last election campaign then. What lobbying did you, the National Party, do in Cabinet to progress the flexible parental leave policy?
We did not put that policy in our coalition agreement with ACT, and therefore it wasn't on the Minister's work program. Many issues have been on her work program which were directly reflective of the coalition agreement, whether that's extending 90-day trials, changes to the Holidays Act, the Health and Safety Act, removal of compulsory union agreements. And so, as has been the case with all ministers, she has prioritised the work that was in the coalition agreement. Our point is a very simple one, which is if people want the policy that we announced at the weekend, the best way to achieve that is to party vote National so that we can argue strongly for it in our negotiation of the next coalition agreement.
Does coalition agreements sign all the parties up to National's policy manifestos?
No, we prioritised in our part of the agreement the delivery of our fiscal, economic and tax plans. And so parties did sign up to all of those, but that did not include the commitment to flexible parental leave. We did keep it on the agenda, however. Our MP, Dana Kirkpatrick, continues to have it in a members' bill in the biscuit tin to keep it on the agenda. It remains and has remained National Party policy. But we accept that ministers cannot do everything all at once, and Minister Van Velden has appropriately prioritised those commitments which were made in the coalition agreement.
Why is it in 2023 you promised 130,000 families would benefit from family boost, but only about 97,000 have, despite it having an expanded eligibility?
Well, as I've acknowledged several times previously, that was based on data given to us by IRD at the time. They were very weak on their data because this is the first time in New Zealand that a scheme has been put in place that refunds fees based on those paid by parents. We didn't have good data about what fees were being paid by parents. The commitment that we made was to ensure that families on these incomes would be able to get refunds for their fees. We have delivered on that commitment, and last year you saw us take further steps to expand eligibility for the scheme. And look, I'm really pleased that almost 100,000 families have benefited as a result.
Can I get a quick answer to the question?
Sorry, Jenna, let's protect turns.
Yeah, so to your question, I think what you're getting at is a question about the $75 or more each week, which was the maximum that we campaigned on when we were in opposition. And in terms of that figure, an average of 12,331 families per quarter have received $75 or more each week. In terms of the other figure, which is the 120, which was what we increased it to last year, I'm just chasing my office for that exact figure, and I'll get back to you on it.
Shall we go to Julia?
Just following Jamie's
6,566.
Just following on from Jamie's question, about a year ago Inland Revenue said those estimates of uptake and eligibility of 100k and 21k were wrong. So it's been a year since then. We have more data since then. Have you been provided by those IRD officials any more figures that are perhaps stronger or clearer than a year ago?
Well, yes, because we can now confirm that 115,000 families have registered for Family Boost and that 97,843 families have received a Family Boost payment as of the 14th of July 2026. So those numbers are based on what's actually happened in terms of parents applying for refunds and based on the fees that they are actually paying.
Do you know how many that are eligible haven't registered for Family Boost?
No, that's a very difficult number to guess at because we simply can't know that information. But I would repeat again today that if you are a family that is paying early childhood education fees, please register for the scheme. Go onto the IRD website, see whether you're eligible and register.
Where are you at with the work to make it not a refundable payment? So like automating it so that it's not as much administrative work for parents?
Yeah, look, the key issue there is about interoperability with early childhood education centres systems, and the advice we've received from IRD is that there are larger centres who might be capable of those IT upgrades, but a range of smaller centres, play centres, kohanga reo, smaller centres may have real challenges updating their IT systems. Regardless, we have asked Inland Revenue to progress discussions with the larger providers to see if we can make those upgrades in the future, and that consultation is ongoing.
So what's the likely rollout for that? Because you initially said 2 to 3 years from, I think, about March 2024, which would put us about now.
That's right. So I am expecting advice from IRD on that in the coming weeks.
So what proportion of those who are eligible have received a payment?
As I say, in terms of who's eligible for the payment, that is a difficult number to think of precisely because it's a combination of two things. One, how much people are paying in fees, and we don't have definitive data on that in New Zealand. That's one of the limitations with modelling anything of this sort because people's fees that they pay are a private matter between them and their early childcare centre, and they vary according to the hours their children are enrolled for, how many weeks of the year they attend early childhood centres. Then the second factor is how many people are earning an income within the eligible income bracket on a household basis. So again, it's not about an individual's income, it's about what your income is between the two caregivers in a family. So all of those constraints mean it's very difficult for IRD to model the full number of families who would be eligible for the scheme, which is how we got into that original challenge with them overestimating how many people would benefit from it. The definitive data that I can give you is that number, that 97,843 families have benefited from the scheme.
Is it right to say then that IRD is giving up trying to estimate how many people would be eligible, giving and noting the complexity with the data? They're not continuing to try to work that out?
Well, I think that they continue to have a view on what the household income distribution is for families. They continue to have a view on fees. That information is being far better informed now that we have the Family Boost scheme up and going because that's giving them a range of data from tens of thousands of families across the country on what fees they're actually paying week to week, and will mean that future modelling they do in this area is better informed.
But I also think, in addition, just you can discuss the mechanisms all day long, but the reality is, we have delivered income tax relief to low and middle income working New Zealanders. We have a Family Boost program in place, which has had good uptake, which has been positive. We've obviously lifted up KiwiSaver contributions, and you've seen us announce obviously PPL changes as well. And we think that's a really good package to support families because we want stronger families in order to take New Zealand forward. So I think I'd focus on the outcomes of relief getting getting to those families and support getting to those families.
So you just mentioned income tax relief. A big part of that income tax relief was to arrest bracket creep, people earning into newer income brackets. Thankfully, wage growth continues. Do you still see bracket creep as a problem, and is it something that you'd look to address in a second term?
Well, yes. We'll continue to look at it from time to time. What was interesting to me though was that after 14 years of wanting to adjust, income tax thresholds, we didn't have support from opposition parties. We didn't have support from unions that represent working people. I thought that was incredibly disappointing. But from my point of view, yes, we'll check it from time to time. Obviously, being in a lower inflation environment is a good thing with less drag. And as you've seen going forward, our real focus is to make sure wages are growing faster than prices, and that's a big focus for us.
Could there be adjustments next term, or is it?
It's not something on our radar at this point in time. But as you saw, it took 14 years under successive governments before any changes were made. We felt strongly about it in opposition. We executed it in their first year in government. We'll look at it from time to time, as we said at the time.
What is your understanding, Prime Minister, of the reasoning behind New Zealand's abstention on the reappointment of the UN's Human Rights Chief?
That's something you have to ask Winston Peters. I saw that this morning. I think he said that he wasn't involved in that decision. It was an MFAT decision. It was a procedural issue. But again, you'd have to direct a question to him.
I guess further to that then, do you think it's unusual that ministers weren't involved in any form in this decision?
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. It's ultimately a decision for MFAT and him. And so direct the question to him.
But if you look at our partners, you spoke earlier in your term about wanting to move in lockstep. The likes of Australia, the UK, France, Germany, Canada, all voting in favour, whereas the other abstaining, some of them, Belarus, Iraq and Ecuador, it seems an odd group to be in, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, as I've said, it's really a question to direct to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Peters has repeatedly now described you as obsequious and subservient during Narendra Modi's visit. Is that appropriate coming from our foreign
I just think it's
minister?
Disappointing. I've said everything I want to say about that essentially last week, and I don't think there's much value in going back to it. But I just think when we've got a world leader of a major economy in a major country in New Zealand, I'm really proud actually of the 24 hours we put together where we were able to do our business government to government. We were able to showcase a lot of great business sectors across New Zealand, and importantly we were able to celebrate what is an amazing diaspora here in New Zealand that's made a massive contribution to this country. And I thought in 24 hours we did a lot to actually position New Zealand well on the world stage. And I think irrespective of how you feel about an FTA or what your personal position or your party political position may be, I think we've had a very strong story of bipartisanship, where actually when New Zealand's out there on the stage, we all get in behind and we support those initiatives in that presentation. But look, he's a big guy. He's been around for a long time. He can explain his own comments. I don't need to do that.
Minister, I want to ask, getting back to coalition agreements,
Yep.
do you at present have the right of veto over other members of the coalition's cabinet appointments?
Well, it's something I usually discuss with the parties when we did the coalition agreements. I agreed exactly, what the mix would be and how the roles would go and who would be placed.
Particular people, do you believe that in future you would have right of veto over who?
Oh, I'm pretty comfortable talking to any cabinet minister as I do
You have
from
the
any
right
party.
to pick and choose for the other parties.
Well, again, we will have that conversation. We go through coalition conversations, and again, we did that this time round. But I just would say the better answer is, who do you want around the cabinet table? And as I said to you before,
call or the other parties.
Well, what I want as many. My call is to make sure I get as many National Party ministers around that cabinet table.
Do you
and
have the
from
right
any
to
other parties.
choose who the other ministers are?
That's
That's
something.
what your comments suggested last week.
Well, again, that's what I have. As we go through the last coalition agreement, we had very open conversations with the leaders between ourselves about who would be the right people on the right assignments.
Just further to that, just on future coalition agreements, Chris Hipkins said last week that he would want, in any kind of coalition agreement or confidence supply agreement, he would want it explicitly written in there or made the expectation clear that as Prime Minister he could discipline or address ministers' behaviour who come from other parties. And it was linked to some of the skirmishes, for want of a better word, that they have seen within your coalition government. Is that something that you would like to have written?
Well, I feel for him because he's wanting to go into partnership with the Greens and Te Pāti Māori and potentially TOP, and that is a hell of a mess. And I agree, it'll be a full-time job managing that chaos. In our case, we come together as three parties. As I said, we find where the common ground is, agree 75% of what we can agree in common and align around, and then we go execute like hell against the economy and against law and order and against health and education, knowing that there'll be differences. nuances and spaces, and will say things differently in a mature MMP environment. So if I have an issue with a minister of any political party in my cabinet, I will raise that and talk to the minister directly and or the party leader that's relevant.
You don't think there's any need for anything explicit in a coalition agreement to say that the Prime Minister can come out and discipline a minister that may...
Do you know what? I reckon Chris Hipkins should spend a lot more time doing policy development rather than thinking about his coalition agreement.
Prime Minister,
Does National have a view on the members' bill announced by the Green Party today? It would give automatic ACC cover to professional and volunteer firefighters with cancer.
But it's not something we've discussed as a caucus at this point.
What do you think
Prime Minister, on the data centres, you said it a few times over the last few days that you're keen to see new data centres bring on additionality in terms of power, but that's not the rules currently. Who's designing those rules? Have you got officials working on that right now? And do you have a time frame for when those new rules might come in?
Yeah, I mean, the point I was just trying to make is I understand the point well, because certainly in my conversations with other leaders around the world, what you've seen, I think, where data centres have started to lose some social licence, particularly in Europe, particularly in North America, that is a concern. Obviously, in our part of the world, we've been, we're following fast. We're not actually leading out on this in the build-out of data centres. We have probably 50 to 60 data centres that have accumulated over recent years. But we obviously are a really attractive proposition now that we also have, frankly, forward electricity prices at $120 rather than the $200 that we had, before. So the key thing for us is just getting some sensible, common sense rules in place. So as I said, that we're up for that conversation. But the answer of putting a one-year moratorium in place is sending a message to global investors, just like Labour, Greens and frankly New Zealand First did on oil and gas. We don't want your money, you're not welcome here, is not the right way forward. Because sitting in Canada thinking about where I might make that investment, of the 195 countries that are out there, we want New Zealand to be a competitive position for that capital to come here. So for us, yes, I've asked Nicola, running economic growth, has engaged MB. I've also engaged DPMC. I also think it would be important, a bit like some of the KiwiSaver conversation, to involve some players outside in the sector that may be coming from the energy side or from the data centre side themselves. And obviously, I think we can find quite good bipartisan support for that going forward. But the answer is not to turn off investment before it's even showed up in the country, and that's what I was reacting to this morning.
Do you think, though, fundamentally you would like to see it so that every single hyperscale data centre had additional power that could cover itself as part of the investment? Or because some people in the sector say, actually, just knowing that we have that much demand going forwards means that we can make the investment anyway, and we don't need to have...
Yeah, look, I mean, it depends. I mean, as you know, different data centres, they're different from each other, and some aren't using heaps of water, some are using air-cooled technology. So, when you're in the US, I heard Chloe Swarbrick talk about it on the weekend, but if you're in the US in a high-temperature environment, climate, you're going through a power of water, and I get all of that. That isn't... we're not going to be massive consumptions, I don't think, personally, of water when I look across the piece of it, given the nature of our climate and land and all that stuff.
Line for you that they have additional power to cover their own use, or is that not quite a red line? Is that something you'd like to see?
Well, what I'm trying to say is I want to be able to get all the interests that are in that space, come back with some sensible, common sense rules, essentially a compact that we would actually say, this is the deal by which you come into New Zealand if you want to build out a data centre. And again, it depends a little bit on size as to what would need in terms of additionality, but certainly for large ones, absolutely. I mean, we need to make sure that there is additionality. And in some of our cases, there have been data centre investments that have taken place, and they've contracted directly with a gentailer, and actually there might have even been some renewable energy actually generated specifically for that purpose or to support that purpose. So I just think there's a common set of principles that we need to pull together. It is something that I spoke to Prime Minister Albanese about a few months back as well, because essentially if you're based in other parts of the world and you're looking at our part of the world, Australia and New Zealand, I think having some alignment between the two countries is kind of important in this space. So we don't lose the social licence to operate, but actually, importantly, this is a massive opportunity for New Zealand. And what's the point of knocking it off before we've even got any of the investment here? Yes, sorry, Jamie?
Have you ever had to have a formal vote in Cabinet?
A formal what?
A formal vote.
No.
If one of your coalition partners wished to block one of your policies, but National wanted it to proceed, Could you do that, or do your coalition partners have an effective veto over policies?
No, we have what we use our words, and we have a relationship, and we talk about these things. So we don't need to be as.
Your partners did not want to proceed with something.
Well, I just can't. I mean, it hasn't been my
my
experience in 2.5 years. My job is to make sure I can represent all the diverse views that are sitting around that table. Make sure I can get the best out of that team. Where we have our differences, we talk about those pretty upfront. If we need to take them offline and work those through as parties, we do. We've had those mechanisms from day one. So, I'm sure there's some sporty conversations that take place, but that's what you'd expect, and that's what the New Zealand public would expect. But we can manage it. Sorry, Tom Day, you haven't asked a question,
In
mate.
that similar vein, has the legislation for the social media ban gone to Cabinet?
We'll have more to say about that shortly, but I won't talk about what's there yet.
Again, in the same vein, it's been a number of months now since you said the surcharge ban legislation was being put on hold. You were taking a breather on it. Is that going to be passed before the election?
I'm not sure. I mean, the key thing there is to see, given some of the changes the Australians maybe want to see how that sort of is washing down. Obviously, we made changes 1st of December around interchange rates. We want to see how that's packing in as well. I'm quite comfortable if I'd sooner us get it right than to go fast and then have to correct it on the other side. So I know that is work that Canberra is working its way through, but it's important that we get it right rather than fast.
Just want to follow on from your comments about Chris Hipkins and who he might coalesce with.
Yes.
You mentioned Opportunity. Could you also coalesce with the Opportunity Party?
We wouldn't be in business with people who want to increase taxes.
No, you won't coalesce with them?
Very strong position, yeah. I mean, we don't want to do business with parties who want to increase taxes.
Vote for Opportunity is a vote for Labor or for the left?
Yeah, it is. It's a vote for Labor and the Greens because essentially at the moment, and I look at their policies, you've got a universal basic income that wants to make every New Zealander a beneficiary. You've got a land tax sitting there that actually is going to be massive. And what we've seen on the other side, what is it? Wealth tax. I've lost track. Capital gains tax.
Misleading the New Zealand public when they say they could go either way.
Well, I've been saying when people ask, our view is, I gave a view at the beginning of this year. I said, of the parties in Parliament, the 6 of us that are here, who I could and couldn't work with. One of the criteria is when you want to spend more tax more, borrow more, we ain't doing business with you. And when I look at the top policies as I see them today, and in a very cursory glance, it looks like they just want to increase taxes. That's not what we want to do.
You won't go into a governing
Sorry?
arrangement. You won't go into a governing arrangement with the Opportunity Party.
Well, I'm just saying to you, they want to increase taxes. We're a party of low tax. It wouldn't be surprising to any of you to say we don't think we want to do business with them.
Are you ruling them out?
We wouldn't be working with them.
So you would not accept their confidence in a confidence supply agreement. This is a Shermanese statement. They're not.
All right, I think we're done, team, because you're talking hypotheticals. We've got quite a long way to go to November 7th. We're trying to run a country, and we've got to run a government, and that's what we're focused on for the rest of the year.
You asked Hipkins to give a hypothetical in New Zealand.
Sorry?
Last week you asked Hipkins.
No, because those parties are in Parliament, and I was very straight up with you when I announced the election date as to who I would and wouldn't work with. I haven't seen that from Chris Hipkins yet. All I see is some wittering. Okay, thanks, team. Have a good day. See ya.